Right, guys, so welcome to the first of Live with Alex Mortgage Edition. And basically, today we're going to be asking the question, are we in a buyer's market? Okay, so want to keep it simple, just a little 5-10 minute chat in regards to the question here, just using this software for the first time, just double checking where we are. So okay, so also want to have a look at pricing strategies. Okay, we see these days lots of different pricing strategies on the listings on Rightmove and Zoopla. So going to look at how to approach this type of market. Okay, whether you're a first-time buyer, a home mover, or an investor. Okay, obviously if you're a first-time buyer or a home mover, you might need to move quickly, tenancies coming to an end, that sort of thing, and you might be happy to potentially pay full price if you find that dream property. You're not as interested in getting a big reduction like an investor would, where their focus is trying to find a sort of motivated buyer and trying to add value to the property from the outset. So a buyer's market, okay, is effectively, buyer's market occurs when the number of homes available exceeds the potential buyers. Okay, so in this scenario, buyers hold the advantage as they have more choices. Okay, and you can take your time to make that decision. All right. Now, you may even negotiate with sellers to secure more favourable prices. Okay, so now, sometimes you might see on Rightmove in regards to offers over, okay, or guide price, or offers in the region of, or offer between X and Y. You see a lot of auction properties at the moment. So why is that the case? Why isn't it just one simple price? Well, I did ask an estate agent, okay, what they thought of, or why they are pricing properties in this way. And the example I was given, or the reason I was given, is, let's say your property is £380,000, okay, and someone's searching for properties of your type, and let's say they put a maximum price on Rightmove as £375,000, then it means your price isn't going to, or your property isn't going to come up if you're selling it. Your price at 380, their max is 375, where if you put offers over 375, okay, it's going to come up in the 375 area when searching. And I think that is the basic example, and then there's a few different variations of that. So that is the reason we're seeing these different types of pricing strategies on the market. So how do you approach this type of market if you are a first-time buyer and a home mover? Okay, because it's not an easy market, is it, at the moment? What's happened is the stamp duty thresholds got taken away. There's no sort of stamp duty relief anymore, which in my opinion the government should have kept that going, because look what has happened to the market since. Not ideal. So what do you do when you're looking for properties on Rightmove or wherever it is you're looking for them? Because there is an abundance of properties available at the moment. So how do you approach that? So obviously the first thing always to do when you're looking for properties on the market is see how long that property's been on the market for. Okay, so that's the first thing I'd be doing, because if the property's just come on, okay, for a couple of days, then the likelihood is, the seller, also known as the vendor, is going to want to test the market, see if they get any offers, that sort of thing. So if you go straight in with an offer under the market value, you've got less chance of it being accepted, if you're one of the first ones in. However, there of course are many different moving parts and different variables. Not everyone is the same. You can't take a generic approach on every single property on the market. So, if you happen to have a bit of luck and you come across what I call a motivated seller, who is someone who needs to sell, almost desperate to sell, they need that money for one reason or another, then they might obviously take an offer. So that leads me to the second part. It's really important to understand what the seller's position is. How are they hoping to sell the property? What's important to them? Have they got to find another property, or is it known as a chain-free transaction? So they don't have to find another one. So as soon as you buy it, you can move in to the property once the transaction goes through. You haven't got to wait. So got a question here from Bikash that I have just popped on the screen. So, what has been the recent property price trend over the past year? Are property prices declining at the moment? Okay, so what we've seen, we're seeing the aftermath of the mini boom, if you like. So we had a stamp duty holiday, okay? First time buyers, you could buy properties up to a certain level, not pay any stamp duty. It was a lot lower for home movers as well, and there wasn't this horrific excess stamp duty charge if you were looking to buy, another property. And that created a mini boom. Okay, so of course prices went up quite quickly. Now, as of March, April this year, that completely was cut. There was no extension given, and properties have continued coming on the market, and sellers are still expecting that type of level of increase, or still expecting to be able to sell their properties at similar prices to what they were during that mini boom. But of course that's not the case. Stamp duty has impacted the market hugely, and you're now seeing estate agents trying to value properties at the right price, and the sellers, the vendors, are not happy because there's been a drop. They're putting the properties on the market really for prices which are over market value, and then by the time the seller, let's drop the price, the market's dropped again. So we're in this continuous cycle of property prices being overpriced, and that's why there's so many coming on the market at the moment. But that at some point should level out. You'll probably, when you look on these online portals, you are going to see that there's a huge amount of price drops happening. So it feels like, if it's dropped in price, this much, then maybe it's going to drop again. So buyers are a little bit tentative at the moment. We've obviously got another government policy announcement coming up in December. There is talk of lowering stamp duty or having some stamp duty reform. So that also is, making buyers hold off as well. there has been a little bit of an increase the last few months, but yeah, generally speaking, the price trend over the past 1 year, Bikash, is a decline, and they're the reasons. So hopefully that will answer your question there. And if anyone's got any others, please just let me know, and I can get those questions answered. So moving on, we were at the point where we were talking about what the vendor's position is. Are they chain free? Now, when you are viewing properties, if it's difficult to view a property, if the vendor's not coming back quickly, and maybe they cancel the viewings, and that's a red flag to me in a lot of occasions, or it's something I would certainly consider, because someone who wants to sell a property, and they're keen to sell, if you request a viewing, that's going to be turned around pretty quickly. So I'd also take that into account as well. There are other occasions, someone might have a newborn baby or something like that, so that you've got to understand the situation. But that's why it's really important to understand the seller's position in full, so you can get a feel for their situation. You can understand, are you going to be able to get a deal on this property? Sometimes you get the sellers and they put the property on the market, it's overpriced, they're not going to budge, and unless it's your dream home, that's the type of property I'd probably move on from. On the other hand, if you're an investor, you can afford to take your time, and as an investor, if you're buying a buy-to-let property, yes, you've got long-term growth, but I am still trying to find that motivated seller who's desperate to sell. I'm taking a different, looking at it from a different angle. Is there a property which needs a lot of work? The easy wins in a refurb, are your kitchens and your bathrooms and your flooring and that sort of thing. And if you can do as much of that work yourself as possible, then you're adding value. And if you can combine those two together, where you're putting your 25% in as a deposit, and you're getting a good discount on the property, you find that motivated seller who needs the money quickly, and then you're adding value on the property, you may be able to purchase the property, refurbish it, and then remortgage it. It's known as BRR, buy, refurbish, refinance. And then that higher value, you're taking a 75% mortgage, and you've got that 30 odd grand, 40 grand, whatever it is you put in initially. So two very different approaches to the current market, whether you're a first-time buyer, a home mover, or an investor. And there is a lot of properties on the market at the moment. So I do think when everything sort of settles down a little bit, you will be able, the market will start moving. We just need a little bit of an injection of some type to, push everything forward. So that really is it. Okay. Just checking my notes here just to make sure I've covered everything that I wanted to there. We've looked at the pricing strategies, how to approach this type of market, and, are we in a buyer's market? I would say we're moving towards that area, and obviously the longer a property has been on the market for, then the more likely you are to get a discount on that property. So if you can afford to take your time, then I think that's going to give you, an advantage, and you can keep an eye on properties. And if you need to move quickly, you're not so lucky to be in that position where you can take your time, then, obviously you're looking at a home for you to live in, and then you might be happy to pay a bit more than the market conditions dictate if it gets you in your property. Long term, every 10-15 years, markets, the housing market, the history of the housing market, factual data will say property prices always increase in time. So we'll leave it there. Okay, thank you for your question. And Live with Alex will be a more prominent feature from this point, and we'll discuss what's going on in the markets at this sort of time, and basically any related mortgage news that is happening. We will certainly be updating you guys and moving forwards like this. So yeah, thank you very much for everyone who watched. You have a beautiful day, and I'll see you soon.